Today is Equal Pay Day, an opportunity to raise awareness about the gender pay gap, a reminder of systemic inequality women in our lives face every day. Did you know for every dollar a man makes, a woman working full-time year-round makes just 84 cents. This is according to the 2023 U.S. Census. So you're probably wondering, how much of a difference does 16 cents actually make? Well, it's a difference of about 3 months of pay. Think about it this way. It takes women 15 months to earn the same amount as men do in 12 months when you factor in the difference of those 16 cents. Even more jarring when you factor in race and women with disabilities. It's the reason why Equal Pay Day lands in March. The gender pay gap affects nearly every profession. Professor Elizabeth Gregory with University of Houston is here to talk about the gender pay gap. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So, in your own words, explain to us, what is the gender pay gap?
Well, the gender pay gap is essentially the difference in the average male pay among full-time workers from the average female full-time workers' pay. So that can be looked at nationally, it can be looked at locally in terms of Harris County or the state. So you see variation, and it can also be broken out by race, ethnicity, because of course all men don't make the same wages, and neither do all women across racial groups or across ages and other factors. So you could break it out in various ways and get different kinds of numbers. But one of the, as you were leading into the story, one of the direct connections you can make, you had a story about a domestic violence killing, which is of course frequent on the news, and that directly can be connected to the gender pay gap, right? Because women frequently stay in abusive situations because they can't afford to leave, and they don't want their children to be homeless because they don't make enough to support them on their own. So that's one clear example of the way the gender pay gap has an effect in the lives of many people locally, and of course not most people, but it does create problems in terms of people being able to, provide as much as for their families as they might be able to if they made an equal wage.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point to make, and one that's, understandable when you connect the dots, that this doesn't just impact women. It can have a profound impact on the entire family that they support when it comes to that dependency. I know this might be a vague question, but have we seen improvements of recent within the gender pay gap? I know that there are different levels of this to examine this from, whether that be federal, state, local, but speaking about the local gender pay gap, have we seen any improvements there?
Yes, the dynamic around the pandemic was one of a tight labor market, so it did lead to some increases in pay. So nationally, the difference between 2015, where it was 80 cents on the dollar, and 2023, where it's now 84 cents on the dollar, that's a 20% improvement over that period of time, over the past 8 years. So that's good. Yeah, that kind of change is good. So there's still a big differential, but it has improved. It was 40% in 1960, so that was almost 65 years ago. So it's improved, but it's still taking a long time.
Yeah. Why do women make less?
Well, there's a whole history behind it. I mean, part of it is occupational segregation, where people sort into different kinds of jobs, and women end up in jobs frequently that are associated with some kind of caregiving, that are associated with the kind of work that historically they did at home, and that has frequently been undervalued. So doing cleaning work, doing childcare work, being home health aides, working as teachers, elementary teachers, different kinds of jobs that haven't been associated with higher wages. So and then there are other dynamics around who gets promoted. If women aren't seen as natural leaders, then they're going to be in the lower pay scale within their job relative to their male counterparts who do get promoted. And then there's also the issue of the lack of a child care infrastructure, so that frequently employers will see women as unreliable workers. They think, well, she might have kids, she might leave, or she does have kids and she's working hard, but who knows, her kids might get sick and then she would have to step out. So do I want to invest in her? So that's an issue of the failure of our society to provide a child care infrastructure that would allow employers to feel that their female workers would be consistently reliable. So all of those factors play in. Also, sometimes there's bias. You know, historically there was this sense that men needed the money more to support their families. Now we know that large numbers of women do support their families on their own, and also women who are in partnerships, their money is needed too, you know. So it's not really the case that men need the money more. So those factors all add up together to create this disparity that we see.
And I know on top of this, everything you've just mentioned, when we factor in race and ethnicity, age, those also add to the several layers here.
That's right. Here in Harris County, when you compare by race, ethnicity, male and female workers to the highest earners in the county. Now, in the country, the highest earners overall are Asian men, but in Harris County, the highest earners are white men. And white women compared to white men make 75 cents on the dollar, whereas Asian women make 71 cents on the dollar. Black women make 55 cents on the dollar, and Hispanic women make 41 cents on the dollar. So that's a big range there of inequity.
Yeah, certainly so. And it's heartbreaking when you wrap your mind around those figures and compare it to the dollar. That's really tough. You know, I want to ask you, Elizabeth, you know, we're fortunate enough to work in an environment led by women. Both our assistant news director and news director, they are both females. Our president and CEO is a female. When you have women at the helm, do you see a difference here? Do you see fewer disparities when it comes to pay?
I'm not going to make a blanket statement because I'm sure that there are inequities promoted by various individuals across the board, but you will see a larger likelihood of awareness of the issues. Now, not to be unfair, this has been something that has been increasingly something that employers of all genders are aware of because they want to retain their employees. So equity is one of the ways to retain employees. So it's simply a good employer who uses equitable policies, so male or female,
right,
in order to keep your business afloat.
Yeah. In addition to that, what are some other ways we can further this conversation? How can we advocate for change?
Well, one of the points around that infrastructure issue is a huge issue, making sure that that there is a child care infrastructure so that people, if public school were expanded to include an after-school program that was free, where children could go for tutoring, to play games and sports, the same way that people pay to have their children go to after-school programs if they can afford them, then you would benefit both the children and the families, because part of the dynamic around equal pay is that it's a comparison of full-time workers, but many women are not included in the full-time worker group because they have to be home at 3 o'clock to pick up their kids because school stops at 3 o'clock. And of course, they don't have childcare during the summer, and they don't have childcare before the child is 5 years old when kindergarten steps in for many school districts. So a lot of female workers are unsupported in that way. And if we created a wraparound school system, that was optional. People wouldn't have to employ it if they didn't want to, but it would make things equitable so that people who wanted to use it could get the same benefit that the many more wealthy families do get currently when they can afford aftercare and childcare and summer camps and things like that. So that kind of a structure, people think, oh, that's really expensive. It is expensive in the initial, but all those people pay taxes who are doing those jobs, and all the new workers pay taxes, and they contribute, they spend their money in all the businesses, so it circulates, and there's benefit over the longer term, and of course kids benefit. So that's one way. But another way would be to make sure that women get access to the full range of jobs that are well-paid jobs. For instance, there's this new Infrastructure Act that is, creating a lot of jobs in communities across the country, building bridges, putting in Wi-Fi in rural areas and things like that. And a lot of those jobs are coded masculine. So just making sure that women have access to those jobs in equal measure that are really well-paid jobs will be the kind of move that can move the needle on these kinds of things. And of course, they'll need childcare in order to take the jobs. So combination.
Yeah, those long-term investments. It was just last week we had the opportunity to sit down with Women in Construction. It's an association, it's a national association, and it's the demand's there, the need is there, and so oftentimes when we think of construction, we think of it being a male-dominated industry, which that it is, but there's also opportunity for women, and that contribution is large. And so, the more women they can have in those positions, the more opportunity that they can have. For young women starting their career, or even women looking to get promoted, what advice do you have for them, if any, when it comes time to talk money with their employer?
Well, we hold a class at U of H where it's called Start Smart, and it's a salary negotiation workshop, and it's about negotiating your first salary, because of course that's another situation in which salary differences can be introduced. If you are more of an advocate for yourself at the floor when you're entering the job market, you're going to be better off over the long term when you start getting percentage wages. Because if you've negotiated yourself a $10,000 higher starting salary than your coworker, then you're always going to be doing better. And there was evidence, or there continues to be evidence, that male workers frequently are more secure, you might say, in advocating for themselves, whereas women might be feeling that they shouldn't be too perceived as aggressive or something like that. It might risk their job. But if they can go in prepared with an argument about the value that they bring to the job based on their CV, and they just make the case, do the research in advance. What will your costs be, so that you don't want to end up with a salary that's not going to supply your needs? And then what are the average salaries of people in your field starting out, so that you'll know what is a fair wage. So do the research in advance and go in as your own advocate. Think of yourself as your own lawyer.
Right.
And make the case for yourself. And that's true for men and women, but women historically have been disadvantaged in that respect. So that's one way. Just to look into the Start Smart program, or just look into what kind of resources there are for knowing what is equitable in your region in the field that you're going into.
Yeah, knowing your worth. Elizabeth Gregory, thank you so much for your time this morning. We do appreciate it.
Thank you. Good to talk to you.